The UK government and the EU have agreed to a trade agreement that would cement the United Kingdom's exit from the European Union. Talking Points analyst Michael Furnari will tell us more.
On Sunday, EU leaders endorsed an agreement for Britain's exit from the European Union. The deal, negotiated with UK Prime Minister Theresa May, outlines the economic future between the UK and the EU. The exact details of the new agreement have not been released yet, but the agreement has reportedly been shared with UK members of Parliament who will vote on the bill themselves next Sunday. May's agreement would lead to a year-long transition period where the UK will operate without trade agreements. The period is expected to cost the UK billions of dollars in trade. And in the wake of an exit from the EU, Britain would also have to restructure their trade deals with the US, Australia, and many other countries. The deal is facing intense scrutiny from all sides of Britain's political discourse. As expected, any deal on Brexit won't have support from the country's left wing. However, May has not even won the support of British Conservatives. May, who, despite being a Conservative, voted to remain in the EU, has been under siege from the country's more hardline Conservatives. Boris Johnson and other pro-Brexit figures have lambasted the deal on the grounds the deal still retains too many of the European Union's rules and restricts the UK's trade with other countries. May has been tasked with making a practical proposition out of an aspirational, yet incredibly vague mandate. It seems that there really is no feasible Brexit agreement that could also satisfy the movement's staunchest supporters. And in the meantime, the embattled Prime Minister faces a hostile Parliament eager to find a scapegoat for the exhausting process the country has faced in its bid to leave the EU. Complicating matters further, European diplomats have said that if this deal is rejected by the UK, the EU will not return to the bargaining table, leaving the UK stranded without a trade deal and without a clear future. And as it turns out, leaving the European will not be quite as simple as checking yes on a ballot. And in the coming weeks, we will see whether or not UK's Parliament is willing to accept what may be an imperfect solution in order to move closer to leaving the EU.
So Michael, moving forward on this, Theresa May has taken it from both sides when it comes to pro-Brexit voters and left-wing voters. What's been the disconnect between her and those Conservatives, though?
That's a great question, Elijah, and I think the central problem is that Theresa May really is not one of them, at least from their perspective. Now, Theresa May, as I mentioned, did vote Remain. She did not really support the Brexit process. And I think she's coming at it from kind of a more technocratic perspective, from a more economic perspective. And if you look at figures like Boris Johnson or Nigel Farage in European politics, I think their vision for Brexit is a little more romantic. And I think the disconnect there is that they sense, at least, that Theresa May is almost kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out on this whole process. And to them, it's not exactly what they signed up for. And I think the problem, at least for those voters, is that it's so difficult for this to really live up to what people thought it was going to be, because it's so difficult to accomplish.
You mentioned that there's some disconnect between May and some other political figures on this process. So what does the process ultimately mean for May's future?
Theresa May has really taken a beating during this whole thing. Her approval rating has been, kind of fluctuating in the 20s and 30s for really the last year. She had a challenge from within the Conservative movement the last week that ultimately failed. And it's speculated that Theresa May will potentially resign if this deal is not passed. She's currently touring the UK, kind of pitching this agreement to people and giving speeches around the country. And it's really tough to kind of see her future in a positive light if this doesn't end up getting passed.